Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that immensely. I also love it when people leave comments, so if you have an idea for a video, a question about this one, if you want to tell me how you do things, or some cool thing that you know how to do, I love to hear those sorts of things. So today I'm going to do something I have been meaning to do for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it, and it's how to do a foxtail chain. I've made one of these a long time ago, and I haven't done it since. But they do make for kind of a cool chain, and I do like making chains because it's kind of, there's something sort of soothing in the repetitiveness of it. So we're going to make a foxtail chain today, and I'll show you two different basic varieties, and I think it'll be a fun one. So stay tuned for that. Before we get started, I wanted to thank some groups of people. First, my patrons over on Patreon. And I really appreciate all of the support that they provide for me and the great community that they've created over there. It's full of interesting, smart, and talented people, and I love to pick their brains sometimes. So thanks for that. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 17,500 last I checked. And that's amazing, and I never ever thought I'd have that many subscribers, but here we are. Thank you for that. Thanks for the nice comments that you leave, and thank you for the super thanks and the Buy Me a Coffees. I really do appreciate that, as well as the people who've bought my recent ebook, so thanks for that. All right, well, let's get started on the foxtail chains. This is one of my design idea books you can get on my merch store if you're interested. I have a number of different varieties. This particular one has conversion chart on the back for fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, which I find super useful. So there's a couple of other ones that have some interesting information on them as well, so check those out. I like these because it allows me to sketch up my designs in advance, and I end up having a better outcome generally. And they have this nice grid pattern in the background to help me keep things sort of symmetrical, since that's not necessarily my strongest suit. But here's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a little chain. This is an example of a foxtail chain, and this was a prototype since I hadn't done one in a long time. And I did these ones with a little bit longer lengths than I'm planning to use today. I did a little prototype this morning of the size I want to do it. This one's a little bit shorter on the pieces of wire that I made. I'll be using 18 gauge round wire, which is about a millimeter, 1.02. The diameter of the rings is going to be a little bit bigger than 16 because I'm wrapping it around a 16 millimeter dapping punch, and it's going to spring open slightly when I do that. It ended up being about 55 to 57 millimeters long on each piece of wire that I'm going to make the individual links from. So the way to do these is we're going to make a circle, we're going to stretch it out into kind of a lozenge shape, and then we're going to bend it over this way, and then you can start interlocking them, and I'll show you how to do that. When we get to the end, I'm going to go ahead and create some end caps. This ends up having kind of a square profile once we run it through a draw plate and stuff. And so we'll put some square end caps on the end. And I have a box clasp that I made for a video quite a while back. It's one of these little ones that has little flippy jobs on the side. This just slides in there. And so I thought, you know, it's been sitting around, I might as well use it. So we'll put that on there as the clasp today. If you want to see how I made that, there's a good video on that, as well as a couple of other kinds of clasps. So check that video out. That's a good video. But let's get started. I think to start with, here's my little 16 millimeter dapping punch. I'm going to cut some 18 gauge round wire, and we'll start making loops. The overall length of the bracelet is going to be about 7.5 inches. I used my wife's wrist to measure this one, and that's a good size to fit on her wrist comfortably. So we'll start by making some rings. I'll probably need to make more after this, but I'll do some on camera and we'll start hooking them together, and then I'll do the rest off camera so I don't have to watch the entire process because it's going to be relatively repetitive. I'm going to try and stay a little better in frame than I did on my last video. I occasionally get focused on what I'm doing and forget where my hands are supposed to be. I think one of the interesting things to do with these would be the proportion between the thickness of the wire and the size of the ring you're making are going to change the appearance significantly, I think. And so it might be fun to experiment with some different sizes. Like I said, it's been a while since I made one of these, so you can cut off your jump rings however you want. I'm just going to use my wire cutters. They cut flush on one side, so I'll just have to flip them over each time I make a cut. And that'll give us a pretty decent end. I think the size-wise, the closer you get these to being exactly the same, the neater looking chain you'll end up with. At least from my experience. This is one of those things that it's nice if you have a square draw plate to do it with, but honestly I think you could probably do it without the draw plate. If you do some careful hammering with your first a plastic hammer and then a chasing hammer maybe, and then some cleanup filing, I think that would make for a decent chain. So if you don't have a draw plate that's square, don't despair. I think you could probably still pull this off. So what I'm going to do is just get these all lined up nice. I wanted to thank everybody who's bought my new ebook. It's a guide to 2024's YouTube videos. There is a lot of information packed in there and links to all of my videos from last year's tutorials. I think there's 170 some videos from last year. So there's a lot of projects you can have right at your fingertips. I put things like a picture of the project, the final project, a picture of the sketch that I made for it, list of materials, difficulty rating, that's sort of subjective on my part, and some notes about the project, like did I like the outcome, would I do it differently if I did it again, because a lot of these, this is a learning process for me too, where occasionally I'll have sort of an epiphany. I've done something for one way for a long time, and then I realize that there's an easier way to do it, where I'm holding on to some kind of way I did things, even though I've since learned how to do it better, or an easier way, or whatever. It's hard to shake old habits sometimes, but that's how you learn, is trying to push yourself to try new things. So, also going to be, since we're going to be bending these multiple times, I'll probably be annealing them a few times along the way. Annealing is where you heat the metal up to soften it back up after you've hardened it by bending it or twisting it or pounding on it. And sometimes you want the metal to be more malleable again, so you can shape it more easily. And so I'll probably be doing that. And you just heat it up to where it's kind of a dull red color, and then let it cool off, and then quench it towards the end once it's almost cool. For these, I'm going to use pretty small pieces of solder. I don't want to have a big lump of solder. So if you've never been to my channel, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, which is what this is. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a dropper bottle. And my torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It's my favorite torch I've ever found. So it's a nice torch. I use a #1 tip on it for most things. All right. Another thing I do, and you don't have to do it for this one, but I do pick soldering, which allows me to place solder really precisely without having to use tweezers or anything. So to do that, I pick it up on the end of this titanium soldering pick and then just place it where I want it when I get the temperature up to the right temperature. When I get the piece up to the right temperature, I should say. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up there to a video about it. A really useful skill. But like I said, you could just lean a little piece against there if you want to. I may use a little easy paste solder for the hooking the clasp on, so I don't mess anything up. Nothing worse than messing something up right at the end. So we need to make these into kind of that lozenge shape. I'm going to put the solder joint right at the end, so it's not in the middle of the thing. It makes it hard to bend. There's a lot of different ways to spread these open. There's these kind of things are great for spreading open chains. I think Flying Chef sent these ones to me, and they're nice. Fortunately for this one, they're not quite big enough to stretch them out as much as I need. So I'll show you how I'm going to do it in a minute. But to start with, I think I'm just going to stretch them part way like this. Try and make sure that that solder joint is right on the end there. And then we're going to go over to my little cheap vise that I got on, I think it was on Amazon probably. But it works pretty well when you want to stretch things out. So. Okay, so I'm going to take these over to my vise over there. I'll bring you with me. Okay, so this little vise, like I said, I got it on Amazon. And you can screw it open or screw it closed like that. It's got these little pins here, so if I set them like that, then I can just twist it. And loosen it back up, and I got a pretty good symmetrical loop like that. So that's kind of what I want. So I'm going to do that to all of these. This knurled handle on this kind of chews up my fingers. I may put some of those little rubber protectors on my fingers when I do this. Okay, I'm going to take those back and anneal those. Let those sit for a few. Okay, so I'm going to use the second smallest cylinder on my veil making pliers here, because it's similar in size to the end of those. curve on the end here. I'm going to just kind of find the center. Wrap it around like this. And then I kind of want to do this a little bit, so it's actually kind of that shape. Okay, so I'm doing this above the paper so you can see better what I'm doing, but there's two basic kinds you can do. There's the single ones where I'm just going to take this one this way and this one this way and slide them together like that. And you can just keep repeating that. And it's kind of this broad open sort of chain like that. And those are nice, but they're not very complex looking or that intriguing, I think. So the other kind is where you interlock them a little bit more. And to do that, once you have the first two hooked like that, I'm going to push it up a little bit. And we're going to stick this one through that little gap in the middle there. Maybe. You should be able to kind of turn it that way, and then we got it started. So now each time, now that we got that first one in there, each one's going to have a little slot right there, and that's where we feed each successive one through. So if you need to, you can narrow these down a little bit to get them through there. Oops. So right here, I like to use my round nose pliers to turn them, just like that. Next one will go right there. There we go. It might help to have something sharp to stick in here to spread it open a little bit. Like maybe I have a thought. Right back. Like an ice pick. Just kind of widen that a little bit. Don't stab yourself, hopefully. See how it starts to kind of make kind of a cool interlocked pattern like that? It's not very flexible at this point, but we'll do some stretching on it after we get it all assembled. So we'll just keep working our way down. Alright, so I'm just going to make some more of those and just keep going until it gets to be about 162 millimeters long, which is about 6 3/8, because that's the length of the chain needs to be minus the clasp. Although probably, since I'm gonna flatten this a little bit from both directions, so it gets a little more compressed and square, and then pull it through the draw plate, so it's actually going to end up being a little bit longer probably. So I may not need to make it a full 6 3/8, but we'll see. So I'll be back after I make some more of those. Okay, I got a pretty good chain going on here, and it is about, say, 162. We're pretty close to in that range there, 6 3/8 or so. And I think we're probably close enough because it's going to stretch out a little bit as we pull it through the draw plate. So, before I do that though, I think I'm going to take my plastic hammer and do a little bit of making sure everything's sort of tightly put together from both directions. Always amazes me when you do stuff like that, because it was pretty symmetrical before, but this really makes it look much more symmetrical even now. But let's see if that stretched at all. I bet it did. Yeah, now it's longer than it needs to be, so I'll probably end up having to cut some of it off. So, but our next step is going to be to go over to the draw plate and see if we can feed it through the first hole. If it's not quite small enough, I can roll it through my rolling mill a tiny bit. In the wire reduction wheels, because they're basically squares turned on their corner. And so let's go over there and see if we can do that. Oh, actually, let's anneal it first. I'm going to make sure not to get it hot enough to reflow that solder. So let that cool for a minute. Seems like there's lots of fun experimentation you can do with this one. I also thought about it'd be kind of fun to alternate copper, brass, and silver, maybe. That would be kind of interesting to try. Everything's still moving okay. Okay, let me see. I need to make something I can run through here to grab onto with my draw tongs. So let me find some 14 gauge around here. So when we put it through the draw plate, we can put this in there and grab this with the draw tongs instead of the end of this. So let's go over there and do that. Okay, here's my square draw plate, and I checked, and this will just barely squeeze through there, the first biggest hole in it. And so we'll start there, but to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to rub some wax on it to give it a little lubrication. And then let's feed this through there. We'll have to use a little elbow grease now. using an idiom like that probably dates me. Okay. That kind of cleaned it up nice. Look at that. Should we do it one more time and see if we can get it through the next one? Looks like we should be able to. Oh, that looks really symmetrical now. I was going to file it this way. We'll see though. I'm going to loosen it up a little bit. Maybe anneal it, and then we'll start bending it a little bit to see if we can, make it a little more flexible. And then we'll go from there. So, okay, I'm going to anneal it real quick. I'll be right back. Okay. I hammered it again, and I waxed it again, and I even filed each side a little bit flatter. So we'll see if that helps at all. I like to get it through one more time. Go. That's what we want to see. Okay, back to the drawing board, and we'll anneal it a little bit more and make sure it's the length we want it to be. Okay, it's pretty stiff, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of bend it around this little mandrel projection. Let's turn it 90 degrees and do the same thing. It's starting to be more flexible. That's what I like to see. Okay, so I'm going to anneal this once more. That cool off and then pickle for a while. If you've never polished a chain on a wheel, wrapping it around a dowel or something and containing any loose parts of it is a good idea if you're going to do that. I would say if you've never done it before, practice carefully and make sure that you don't get a finger caught between the chain and the wheel. You can always tumble it too, although that doesn't remove scratches or really get rid of any kind of fire coat or anything if you have any of that. So just be cautious. Polishing chains on wheels is dangerous. Okay, so I cut a strip of 26 gauge sterling sheet, so it's pretty thin. And how wide did I cut this? About 6 millimeters. So what I need to do, on one of these ends here, I flattened these a little bit so they spread out a little closer to the, because it got a little bit narrower because I was pulling so hard on that. And so I spread them out so they're more squarish. I probably will do that too when I put this in there. But I'm going to make a box around that. And so to start with, let's let's file in. Needs to be about that wide. That's good. I don't want it to be too loose in there. I want this to fit snugly. File this end a little bit. So I cut a little square for the top after I kind of neatened this up. Let's plop that on there. We'll flux it and put a couple of pieces of solder inside of there and heat it till it attaches. Just kind of file this flush. So I'm gonna use a little 18 gauge jump ring, I think, that I made earlier. So let's cut one off here. What I'll do is I'll solder this closed, and I'll sweat solder a little bit of on there too as well, and then I'll pick it up and just plop it on there and solder it down. Hopefully I got that pretty close to the middle. Guess we'll find out. That's good enough, I think. Okay. So, I'm going to make another one, but we're going to slide those on there. I think I'm going to use some easy solder. Just solder those right on there. So I'll have to flare this end out a little bit too. So I'll be back after I make another one of these. Be right back. Okay, so I have a second one made here, and I have them both on here. I put some easy paste solder on the inside of these, as well as on the actual last loop there. And so we're going to try and get that to flow now. Make sure that everything gets hot enough without refilling that other hard solder. so on this side, I think I'm going to snip this, and I'm going to use a little bit more easy solder. So we'll connect those. Okay, I believe everything is connected here, so we're going to let that pickle for a while. I'll get it polished up and we'll see how it looks. Be back in a bit. Okay, well, I got this guy all shined up. Pickled him for a while. And the more I polished it, the more flexible it got too, I noticed. That's kind of interesting. So, let's see. That way. There we go. Might need to see if I can get that a little more flexible right on the end there. This side's okay. I think something may have soldered a little bit over here where I didn't want it to, perhaps. But still, I'll tighten these little clips on. I think that's a nice bracelet. So next time maybe I'll try some variations of this. Do that sometime. Okay, well, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well, that was a foxtail bracelet. I hope you enjoyed that and learned a little something. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. I'd love it if you'd stop by and check out my main channel page. I have 430 or so videos, so there's tons of content, all different skill levels and lots of projects. So check it out, watch a few. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell if you want notifications. I do publish 3 videos per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday. Before you leave also, make sure to hit the video description down below. There's some important links. There's a link to where you can buy my new ebook, which I told you about. There's a link to get some of those nice design idea notebooks to keep track of your projects in. And there's even a link to Patreon if you want to check out some of the features over there and join that community. So, all right, well, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great weekend. Happy silversmithing.